Well, dude,
Survivor Man says never sweat in the cold. You know what? We should next year. You're coming to IBS, and we're gonna do a podcast at IBS. Where's your head at? Where's your head at? You know what I'm saying? It's a song, man.
Sure.
Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Welcome to our second episode of the Dr. Decks podcast.
Hi.
This is DJ Studio Man. He is in charge, large and in charge, because I don't know what I'm doing. All I do is I just know how to talk, okay? So we had a really great podcast last week. And I'm my guest. Okay, here's the deal. We do our podcast on Fridays, and we're doing it from the job site. So kind of something a little different. We're not all comfy, cozy, warm, tucked in our office or in our studio. We are freezing cold, freezing our buns off, can't feel our fingers or our toes out in sub-zero temperatures.
It's not sub-zero.
Not today. It's 36.
That's warm compared to what it was a few days ago.
A lot of Canadians be crying.
It was like 21.
Foul. Yeah, it was 17 degrees where we are right now, plus wind chill. So it has been pretty unseasonably cold for us.
That's like -8 for the rest of the world?
Yeah, -8 Celsius. So, anyways, we're here, and today, as a topic, I got some things I could talk about, but I was going to go back to our special guest. So today is Friday, February 14th.
Valentine's Day.
I had a very special guest lined up for today, but the problem is we're on the West Coast. He's on the East Coast. We shoot this around 2 p.m. It was 5 p.m. on Friday, Valentine's Day, his time. And he's like, dude. And I said, you know what? Say no more. I get it.
We get it.
It's okay.
We both have lives. We get it.
Stupid of me to even ask you to do that. I wasn't even thinking that about Valentine's Day or anything. Anywho, so we had to reschedule, but the problem is the next 2 Fridays, I'm going to be at the International Builder Show in Las Vegas, Nevada. So we're not going to shoot a podcast for the next 2 weeks after this one. So that puts us 3 weeks out. Am I telling everybody who the guest is?
Not yet. That was something they got on the premium episode of the podcast, which
That's
you
right.
can go. If you're watching, it's in the description, or you go to patreon.com/drdecks. If you want more bonus content, there's a whole bunch of stuff on there. If you want to support us and want more Dr. Decks.
Yeah, basically give us money and we give you extra stuff. And we really appreciate it.
Extra information that you won't hear anywhere else.
Yeah, you're helping starving students succeed in life. I don't know. Just came out. Anyway, all right.
True.
So I'm not going to tell you who the guest is going to be on our podcast. If you want to find out early, give us $5 and you'll learn about it in the bonus section of our podcast.
Plus some other things. There's more. You get more stuff.
See, that's why he's here.
That.
That's why he's here. Cause
I got to set him straight, guys.
You can end up with a Dr. Decks t-shirt for free if you have the right tier. I think it's surgeon? Physician? What is it?
Surgeon. I think.
Ooh, sounds delicious. I might have to subscribe to that.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so this guy, no, seriously though, if you're a doctor or if you drive a bus or you're a race car driver, whatever you do in life, lawyer, there's people in your industry that you respect, right? Well, this guy, he when I was thinking about who do I want to have as a guest on our podcast, this is my number one. And he said yes. And I just got off the phone with him because I was apologizing for trying to get him to come on Valentine's Day. And he is and I put him on speaker, so Studio Man heard it too. And he is really excited. He's jacked. He is really jacked and eager to do this. So I think we're going to get a lot of great support from people that want to be on our podcast, man.
I hope
it's
so.
the premium number one podcast that you could ever be on. So if you want to be on this podcast, hit me up. I think your best way to do that is probably not through YouTube.
No.
It's going to be through Instagram, right?
I believe so.
My DMs, I definitely get back to my DMs on Instagram much better than I do any other service. It's not personal. YouTube, love you. I don't even know what Patreon is, so probably not going to be replying too many on that. Maybe Studio Man
You will.
Okay.
You will.
All right.
It's my job to make sure that he does.
Well, especially for those bonus features.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, I'm yawning a little bit. I apologize for that.
It's Friday.
Usually Fridays are exhausting time of the week for me, especially in the afternoon. Like last 2 hours of the day, dang.
You want to get stuff done. You want to go home. You just want to get out of here.
68 hours in this week so far, and I'm kind of tired. Yeah. But I thought that maybe Fridays would be good for you guys because I have done so much during the week I can talk about on top of everything else that we are talking about in these podcasts. But my main goal for me, and this may change depending on you guys and Studio Man, is are we going to have a bunch of badass people just on our show that we are just going to interview? Or are we going to do topics, build topics, and talk about some of this stuff that maybe we show on the internet, but we don't really talk about it in depth or detail? And if that's something you guys want, I just kind of need to know where you're at. Where's your head at? Where's your head at? You know what I'm saying? It's a song, man.
Sure.
Okay. So anyway, okay, with all that being said,
Again. Because we said it in the first one.
Yeah, but I'm pretty excited about it now. That it makes me feel good when my friends. This guy's a friend of mine. When my friends are like, "Yeah, I'll support you. I'll be on your show." I'm like, "Cool. I'm down with that because that makes me feel good, man. I'm all warm and fuzzy inside, even though it's cold."
Yeah, whatever helps you stay warm in this weather.
So today we're gonna talk about how to build a deck A to Z.
Pretty much, maybe not in A to Z format, not like A, B.
Right,
A, B,
right.
C,
There may
D.
not be 26 steps on how to build a deck.
But basically, if you're looking at your phone, you need to not be. The idea is if you want to start building decks, this is the video you need to watch. And he's going to explain everything because I'm not qualified to do this at all. I'm just here.
He's the tech.
That's why I'm looking over here.
He's a technology.
There's a whole bunch of gear over here that I'm monitoring.
Yeah, I see it.
But he's going to explain everything. If you want to start building decks, this is how you want to do it. This is what you want to listen for. And this is what's going to set you off in the path where you can like do your own research, experiment with your own stuff, supplement your knowledge with, anything.
I think that's a great, what you just said, Calvin.
What?
That resonates with me, man. Supplement your knowledge. I think that's what this is basically what we're doing.
Because, okay, spoiler, right? You're going to talk about framing at some point, right?
Of course.
But, it takes a long time to like really understand structure and how framing should be, right? So
math. There's some math involved, guys.
So like when you hear him talk about the stuff, we're limiting it to about an hour,
Mm-hmm.
You can learn a lot, but you could maybe you want to like point out things like this is what this is and this is what you should research.
Yep. Exactly. I've already got this in my brain, man. It's burned into my brain.
So he's going to steer you in the direction of where you need to go with these things.
Yeah.
But you want to keep learning. I think in life you always want to keep learning.
Yeah.
I think it's good
even
for
as a pro.
Yeah.
I still learn. I mean, dude, every time I make a mistake, I just learn something.
And that's another thing I think that is important just in life and, in your career is don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's like the number one way you learn.
Expect to, actually.
And if you can fix the mistake, especially like that, that's even better.
Or if
and then you won't do it next time.
Or if you have to throw a $120, $150 deck board away and burn another one to learn from your mistakes, that's great, as long as you don't keep burning those up.
You got to burn a few boards to make that money.
I'm telling you what, I burned $100,000 worth of boards up in my career in 30 years, 25 years of doing it.
But hopefully we're going to avoid that.
Probably, yeah.
Because you're going to listen to him.
Probably won't even get into deck board bending in this episode, but maybe in the bonus feature.
The bonus episode's going to have like more details on different things. This will give you like... I think keep it to the main ideas.
We're getting to the basic. We're doing basics right now.
Yeah.
This is a basic deck build. We're building a square.
Like if you want to do it, you don't know how to do it, and you're kind of like overwhelmed with all the information,
Yeah.
we're gonna set you on a path and push you.
Maybe you're a DIYer, or this is your first deck build, or you wanna start doing it. You used to be a high dollar attorney. Now this is no joke. I've actually had somebody tell me this. High dollar attorney said, I don't want to be an attorney anymore. I want to build decks. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, I'm sick of it, man. I'm burned out. I don't like it. Can I come work with you for 3 or 4 weeks? I go, dude, you're not going to learn anything in 4 weeks. And
It's
no,
like
my insurance policy won't allow it, but
And it's a lifelong, well, not a lifelong, but it's like
It's
a
a career.
multi-year kind of learning
yeah,
process.
yeah, you want to be me, strap on for 10 years. If you just want to learn something, be proficient at it, it's a 3-year minimum in my opinion.
If you just want to build a backyard deck and that's it,
And you don't care what it looks like?
That's totally fine.
Here's a funny thing. You're going to build that backyard deck and not care what it looks like, and then you're going to come look
Until
at 10,
next year.
And then you're going to come look at 10 of my decks, and you're going to be like, expletive. I should have, I really should have maybe taken more time and listened and learned. So with that being said, okay, here you go.
Start at the beginning. Yeah?
Here's the beginning. If you want to build a deck, you really should have a plan. Some kind of a plan of how you're going to build that deck or the size of it. If you went into Home Depot, okay, I'm going to speak in DIY terms, okay? So you go into Home Depot and you bring them a napkin drawing of your 10 by 12. There's going to be some questions they're going to ask you. And the reason I'm laughing is because I don't go to Home Depot and I don't do this. I've never done it in my career. I go to a professional lumberyard.
That might be a cool video. And just like, what can you do? What can you do at Home Depot?
Write it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would like to see that myself.
Well,
You know what?
I think we're
do
gonna
it.
have to make it.
We're going to make it because that would be kind of a funny video, especially depending on who you get to help you. But Calvin, I love it. I love that. Okay, so we'll get to that.
Eventually, not.
Yeah.
Probably not soon.
You never know. You never know. Probably not, but that'd be a good one. So you okay? We'll step it up one notch.
Okay.
You walk in with your graph paper.
Oh.
You got your graph paper with an accurate rectangle, 10 by 16. Okay. And they're gonna say, okay, well, there's some basic things you need to know about this deck before we build it. We're going to ask you some questions. Are you going to have any furniture on it? Are you planning on putting a hot tub on here, a barbecue, and some other weight constriction? Anything heavy, big pots, things like that? Because you can build a deck really cheap, and it'll get you out of the dirt. But
Those are like the floating decks, right?
yeah. But they're gonna put you on some footing blocks, which are just little 12-inch by 12-inch concrete blocks that have a little bracket in them, and that's what they're going to want you to use to support your deck. Well, in most jurisdictions, but especially in my jurisdiction, we have to build to what is called a 60-pound per square foot live load.
What does that mean?
That means for every square foot of the deck, with people, plants, animals, furniture, pool tables, automobiles, whatever you're going to put on that deck, it has to be able to withstand 60 pounds per square foot. Now, in 90% of the country, that is only 40 pounds per square foot. But because a couple people died on a couple decks in Washington, the lawmakers said, oh, we can fix this by just making them build to a higher caliber of weight. That's not true. What you can do is make sure that people are licensed and bonded and insured that are building your decks, and not some weekend warrior that's doing a 12-pack while he's working and only putting one nail in the ledger before they start hanging the joists up.
And we'll get into those terms in a little bit, ledger and joists and you know.
We only got we got 45 minutes to button this up, so I guess I better get cracking. So anyways, yeah, so there's some terminology. Let's roll through it, but the footings. Now, depending on where you're located in this country, they're called different things. Some people call them piers. Some people call them footings. Some people call them other things. So I used to hand dig and pour all my concrete footings. Sometimes I'd have to put rebar in them. Okay.
Is that something you can still do these days? If you don't want whatever?
Yeah. It's still an acceptable way to build.
Is there certain advantages over doing concrete versus footings?
Like precast footing blocks?
Yeah.
Advantages, well, a hand-dug and poured concrete footing is going to hold more weight than a standard block will. If I'm going to use a precast footing block, I can buy these, and they're only available in Washington State because the company that makes them is here. They have a 18-inch round footing block that will take more bearing load capacity. Sorry, got the sniffles.
It's cold.
That will take more of a bearing load capacity than a standard 12-inch by 12-inch square will. So those 18-inch rounds hold more weight. So I will use those in different locations when I'm having to do precast footing blocks versus hand digging. So here's your footing details. You got to figure out how much weight will one footing hold depending on the size of your deck. This is where I'm opting out, and I'm calling my structural engineer, and I'm having him run the calculations to tell me, oh, okay, you're cool here, but over here you got to have a footing that's bigger. Now, I've gone to a thing called helical piles. I started using helical piles because when the state of Washington invoked that 60 pound per square foot live load, what it did to our footing size got ridiculous. I used to be able to get away with a 16-inch square, 12 inches deep. 16?
That's standard in our state, right?
That was standard at 40 pounds per square foot live load. 16 inches. We don't have to go deep here because we don't have a big frost depth, but you need to know what your frost depth is, so you need to know how far down. If not, you're going to get footing heave, which will lift the footings out of the ground when it freezes. If you have a 4-foot frost depth, you're going to be digging deep. And helical piles are a great answer to that because you can go down 6 feet and get past your frost depth, and then the helical will not heave because of the frozen ground.
And basically, for those who aren't in the know, it's basically kind of like a drill.
A ground screw,
A ground screw is a perfect.
Yeah.
It's a perfect.
It's a 3-inch tube. It's a 3-inch tube with a spiral shank on the bottom that when you turn it under high pressure, high hydraulic pressure with the machine, it basically cuts itself into the ground.
And you drive that. How the
minimum around here is 4 feet. I have to go at least 4 feet deep, and up to refusal or up to pressure. So my engineer will spec, depending on the soil conditions, my engineer will spec out, okay, Jason, you have to hit 2,250 foot-pounds of torque, which means I got to hit 2250. I have to hit 1125 PSI. My gauges are rated at PSI. You basically double your PSI to get your foot-pounds of torque. So when I hit 1150, I can stop as long as I'm deep enough with my pile.
Yeah.
I've taught building departments about these things because nobody knows what the heck they are sometimes, and then they're always asking for special inspections. So we'll have somebody on site recording pile pressures with me and recording it and documenting it that I send back to my engineer. It's kind of a process. It's probably easier if you call a helical pile company to do that if you're going to go that route, but don't call me because I don't do it for a private party. I only do it for my own builds.
So that's kind of like more into the advanced stuff if you want to do that.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it's good for everyone to know just kind of like what their options are.
Right.
So you get the footings, probably not, like if you're doing this for the first time, probably not helical piles.
Probably not.
So
but also
you're either going to dig or get those footings.
Yeah, and if you're going over a concrete slab, which tons of people do, don't assume that the 3.5 inches of concrete slab is going to be enough to support your deck, because it's not. You got to punch through the concrete slab and dig down X amount of inches and X amount of size. So what happened was, when state of Washington said, oh, doctor, you got to go to a 60 pound per square foot live load, my engineer's like, oh, doctor, you just went from a 16 by 16 by 12 to a 36 by 36 by 24 inch footing, which means we're pouring yards more concrete into our footings. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way than this. This is crap. It was too much. 32 inches by 32 inches even by even 12 inches deep are monster footings. And it was of my opinion, like, these are just overkill, man. This is ridiculous. So we had to find an alternate way to do it. So having a structural engineer go over your calculations or the size of whatever you're building is always a great thing to do, in my opinion, professionally. So the first thing you have to do is figure out your footings. If you're going to use your home as part of the support, you're gonna take the bearing load of that. It's going to transfer down onto the foundation, and that's going to be good for 50% of the weight of the deck. Then you're still going to have footings and a beam on the outside, somewhere near the outside of the deck, that will help support the other half of the deck.
So what's a beam, and what do you mean by the house takes 50%? Like, what do you have to do with that?
Well, that's called a tributary. I think we're getting really advanced here. There's called a tributary load. The tributary load is split between the house and the structure that you're building as far as a deck goes. So what it does is it decreases the amount of math that absorbs into the beam side of that split equation of the house, between the house and the beam. So before we get into all that, let's just talk about some basic terminology, okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So you have your footings or your piers. You have the posts that go from your footing to the bottom of your beam, okay? So you have post and beam construction, we'll call it, post and beams. Then you have joists, your floor joists. They're in most homes in America, but they're also floor joists for a deck. So you have your joists. And then you have any solid blocking or anything like that you might need for your rail. Railing's a safety thing, it's a beauty thing, but it's also just function. If you're over 30 inches, you're required to have it by law. And then there's accessories, stairs, there's benches, planter boxes, and all kinds of other stuff that you can build into a deck, privacy walls and features, windscreens and all that kind of stuff, patio covers. And remember, if you're going to put a patio cover on your deck, you have to build it so that it'll take the weight. The reason that's a thing is because when it snows, you're putting an incredible amount of weight on top of the roof, which is on your deck.
Yep.
So your deck has to be, the suspension of the deck has to be able to withstand that additional weight.
And that's why the planning is so important.
That's why having a plan is like on point. Now, some of these companies, like I know that at Home Depot, they used to have a deck designer that was put out by McFarland Cascade or something like that. And they had some basic ways, and I'd go on bids and people would pull this stuff out and I'm like, really? You want me to bid on this? And it's not how I would do it. But okay, so we're just going to get back to basics here. So you have your footings, and then you're going to have some usually, unless your deck's really low to the ground, you're going to have some kind of a post that goes from the footing to a beam. So now on the West Coast, our beams are called solid sawn beams. So they're 4x6, 4x8, 4x12. And then we also have 6x6, 6x8, 6x12, 6x10. And that's all I'm used to. I see these guys on the East Coast, they don't have access to those wider solid sawn beams. They're using 2x6, 8, 10, and 12s, and they're screwing them together to create a beam.
And that's why we're saying, like, you need to supplement this stuff, because we're on the West Coast, right? And some of this stuff just isn't available here, or in other places, what I meant. So it's like, we're going to talk about, beams and joists here in a second, and we have a special wood for that.
Right.
That places don't have in
or
other parts of the
metal.
country. True. So
yeah, the wave of the future. We can talk about that. All right. So you've got your footing, you've got your posts, you have your beams. Depending now, the size of your beam, the size of your post, and the size of your beams are determined by how far you're going to span between your footings.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say your footings are going to be 8 feet apart.
Okay, 8 feet.
Here's a rule of thumb. You're doing a 16-foot deck. You got footings on both sides of both ends of the beam, and then you're going to have one in the middle, and they're going to be 8 feet apart. What size beam do you use? You don't know? No.
This is why you're here and I'm not.
All right. So there's a rule of thumb. Now, if it was me and I'm resourceful, I would go onto the internet and I'd go to Google Deck search, which is basically just a Google search, right? And we're going to look for a beam span chart, a 4x beam span chart. And then you're going to look at that beam span chart and you're going to decipher what kind of species of wood are you trying to calculate, because there's all different kinds of species of wood that span differently. Okay, so let's say you're going to use hem fir or Doug fir or pressure treated pine or wet this or a glue lam that. So you got to know what you're using so you can figure out the span. All right, so here's my span. I'm using hemlock where I live, and I need to span 8 feet in between posts. Rule of thumb is for 8 feet means you use an 8-inch beam. So if I'm spanning 6 feet, I could use a 4x6. If I'm spanning 8 feet, I could use a 4x8. If I'm spanning 10 feet between posts, I can usually get away with a 4x10, but not always. It's not always the case, depending on how the deck is loaded, and that's where you're getting out of my pay scale. I know personally what I can get away with confidently, but I am never going to give out that information to somebody else that can sue me because I gave them the wrong information and their deck collapsed.
That's why, again, supplement, do a little research for where you live.
Yeah, and hiring and spending $500 with a structural engineer, maybe $1,000 will save you so much frustration and time. You're going to have the right information. They will stamp your plans, and then they're ready to go. If you have the right information, then they're stamped. Then they can go in for your local building department. If you get a building permit, you're also going to be required to build to a minimum scope that most people will allow you. Let me rephrase that. Let's see. You're going to be able to build to a minimum scope that the city will allow you to build. So if you go in for a building permit, usually if you're under 30 inches, you don't need them. But some jurisdictions say, well, if there's still a door passageway going out onto the deck, that's a fire escape. So we still want a permit. I think it's crap, but, I don't make the rules. I just abide by them.
What was
sometimes
one time you were caught up for 3 months, 6 months?
9 months.
9 months?
That we built this deck on Lake Taps. If you guys go to my Instagram or maybe it's on my website.
It's here on YouTube as well.
2020, yeah. We built this during COVID. It took me 9 months to get that permit through the city of Bonnie Lake. Thank you so much, city of Bonnie Lake. One of the most difficult building departments I deal with. And city of Lakewood's not much better.
They really want specific stuff.
It's ridiculous.
Really specific.
The hardest part of that build, and that build was challenging. That build took it out of me, man. Kind of like the one we're on right now. But that build, the hardest part of that build was getting the permits approved.
Yeah.
I had to jump through so many hoops, man. It was awful. Just awful. I don't understand why people need to make it so difficult for me to do my job. That just sucks. I'm trying to feed my family. I'm trying to feed this guy, my wife, have a shelter to live under, and maybe have a little bit of heat so I can stay warm in the winter. And these people don't care, man. They just keep. And the most frustrating part about it, every time there was a correction on my plans, they wouldn't call me. They would send me a letter.
Come on.
So
this is 2025.
They wouldn't email me. They'd send me a correction letter, which takes a week.
Yeah.
So every time I had to do it, and then they wouldn't give me all the corrections at the same time. Then,
why? Why do they do that?
Dude, I'm telling you, it makes your job really hard when then you think you got it all handled. All right, looks good. Let's submit. Here to go. Da 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 da. Week later, nope, you didn't do this right. Oh, the north isn't facing the right direction on your plan. I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but
you need, if you're doing certain things, you need a permit.
Yeah,
it's important.
Certain decks, yeah. Certain decks you build, you probably should have one.
It's just one of those things,
You should always check your local building code and jurisdiction to see if you need a permit or not.
And I'm not a deck builder, but I've been watching. Literally, this is the 6th year today that I've been on.
Wow.
So I've been watching and listening. So I do know a little bit. Once you get into numbers and stuff, that goes over my head. But I do know you need certain things, and certain things need to go a certain way.
Yep.
It just is what it is.
Yeah, it's not usually the guys that come out and inspect the deck are pretty cool. The field inspectors, it's usually not with them. It's just getting it through the bureaucratic or whatever.
Oh, hold on, don't.
Just getting through the building department can be the hardest part about it. Once you have the permit, it's pretty easy after that.
So
All
you
right.
got your permit. You got your footings in the ground.
Yes, I got my permit.
You
okay.
know whether or not you need posts.
Well, here you go. But hold on.
Oh.
Hold on.
Got ahead of myself.
We got our permit, but they don't allow footing blocks. You're going to have to pour concrete. So we have to dig the holes, and then we have to call the city and ask for a footing inspection before we can go any further with building our deck.
That's one of 3 inspections, right?
Yes, correct.
So you will need...
And they'll come out and they review your plans and they ask a couple questions and then they look at your footing holes and make sure that they're dug the way you have them specified on the plan. And once they can confirm that, then you are allowed to pour concrete.
Again, it is what it is, guys.
Yeah. So there's a footing inspection, there's a framing inspection, and then there's a final inspection. So right now we have our footings in the ground. We've had our footing inspection. We've poured our concrete. We have our posts set to the proper height where we need them. We have our beams spaced every 8 feet with our posts so that our beam is properly supported. Now we have to put our joists in. Now, the first thing you have to do, the next piece of advice, it's 2 stages. And it's the most common failure on a deck that kills people every year is improper ledger installation.
We've talked about this. I've edited so many videos where he said the same thing. Like, the ledger is like the most important thing.
Yes, house prep is so important. Make sure the side of your house is ready to accept a ledger. Make sure you spend that extra $20 on flashing to flash the house properly before you put in your ledger. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. It's that important. You can destroy the entire wall of your home if you don't flash it. Okay? Now, and then proper ledger installation. I use a product called Ledger Lock. There's 4 of them sitting right there on the ground right next to us. These ledger locks are made by a company called Fasten Master, and you use them to attach ledgers to house. That's why it's called a ledger lock, because it's designed to do one thing and one thing only, and does it really, really good. And it locks the ledger to the house. Ledger Lock.
Makes sense.
Not sponsored. Okay, so listen. There's a little chart inside the Ledger Lock box that shows you where to put and how many to put in. But if you're not sure or uncertain about where to put your ledger locks, consult your structural engineer again and ask him, because he can do the math. That's what I really admire. I don't understand a darn thing about what they just put on all this paperwork. I don't get it. But it says, okay, he'll put it in layman's terms for me. Okay, Jason, you got to put a ledger lock 4 inches in, staggered every 6 or 8 inches, depending on the size of the ledger, the size or the size of our joists, right? And determining, and then in a V formation, you got to stagger one every 6 inches, 8 inches. I've gone every 4 inches. I've had to do every 3 inches before because we were putting a hot tub on a deck. Okay.
Which goes back to the load thing, like
yeah,
you were saying.
and don't
You
trust
gotta
me.
know.
Don't. You didn't get that from me. So, but as far as ledger lock location and span, it really depends on the weight of the deck and how big the joists are and how far are they spanning to the beam and how much cantilever do you have past your beam and what's the tributary load of the deck. If you can't answer all those questions, then talk to a structural engineer, because I'm not it. I'm not your structural engineer. Don't send me, you guys. I get emails every week, and it upsets my wife. You guys go to my website, and you have to check 2 boxes. No, I'm a customer. I want to buy something from you, and some other check. And then they ask me a question about advice on how to do something. It's like, that's not what our webpage is for. Our webpage is for customers to contact us that want us to build them something. So
And I think maybe a piece of advice that's also important is like I'll stress it again. You need to do your research for this. You can't just ask him because I think things depend, right? They're like, how many screws should I put in the ledger?
right.
If they ask you that, what else is going on?
Dude, yeah, I don't know. Then I'm going to ask you 15 more questions before I can give you an answer. And I'm still not going to give you that answer because I do not give out legal advice on the internet that may impact me in the future because I gave you the wrong advice. I just don't feel comfortable doing that. So I never have and I never will.
I think it's reasonable. I don't know.
Well, even if it's not, I've had people say, hey, F you, man, you're a whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I'm still not telling you.
I mean, you're just covering your ass, really.
Yes. CYA. I totally agree with that and definitely am. So we have our beam set. We have our ledger properly attached to the house.
We do.
We need to add some floor joists. How far apart should we put those floor joists? We don't know. Well, there's a couple reasons. How far is the joist spanning to the beam?
That means how long it is.
Correct.
Okay.
What length of joist do I need to get to that beam? How much cantilever past the beam am I going to have?
Cantilever means that it's going
beyond,
just past
the beam. So I might have 8 foot to the beam, and then I might be another 2 foot of cantilever. I might have a 10-foot joist total. Let's just say we're building a 12-foot deck, and I have the beam at 10 feet. So I'm spanning 10 feet. I'm spanning 10 feet to the beam, and then I have a 2-foot cantilever. So
is there a limit on how far you can cantilever?
Yeah,
past
and it depends. Again, it depends on your jurisdiction. I've spanned 3 feet on a 2x10, and I've spanned 4 feet on a 2x12 on 16-inch or 12-inch centers. We'll get to that in a minute. And I've had guys in Rhode Island go, that'd never fly in my jurisdiction. We can never cantilever more than 2 feet, regardless of the size of our joist. I'm like, well, get an engineer that says you can, and I bet you could get the building department to accept that. But I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's Mafia Ran. I don't know. I really don't. Okay, so let's go back. We're getting ahead of the game here. So, okay, we're back to joist.
What I'm trying to do is, like, again, if someone's brand new, they might not be familiar with the terms.
Yeah.
I know what it means, but I'm playing, I don't know, devil's advocate
I agree
or whatever.
With that. I think
it's probably not
should.
that term. Just in case someone's like, I'm not sure what that means.
But you can always Google these terms as we're talking about them in case you don't.
Supplement your knowledge.
And again, this is where I put in the friendly reminder to Google floor joist span chart. Just like the beam chart. Remember the beam chart we talked about a few minutes ago? And I've done this several times when I'm just trying to maybe put a bid together and I'm not sure what size joist I'm going to use or how far apart I need to put them. Now, most decking we use requires a 16 inches on center. So we're never going to be over 16 inches on center with our spacing. But
16 on center means there's 16 inches between the joists?
No, it means from center of joist to center of joist is 16 inches, which if depending on the thickness of your joist, if you're using an 1.5 inch thick joist and there's 16 inches on center, then you got to subtract 1.5 inches to know what's in between the joists.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so on center, so if you're 16 inches on center, you're 14.5 inches in between the joists.
Which would mean, on center of joist.
On center is center of joist. Yeah, I didn't come up with the terms. I've been using it for so long, it just doesn't seem natural not to.
I don't know. I think I could be wrong. That seems like something someone might overlook. Center to center.
Yeah, people make
or maybe it's just me, and I'm
and
again. That's why I'm letting him do
the whole house builder thing. Like if you're building a house, your centers are going to be way more important because you're using 4x8 sheets of plywood, and you gotta seam that 4 foot stud in between the center of 2 sheets of 4x8 plywood. If you do it wrong, you're going to be ripping down all your plywood. I could imagine like what a nightmare that would be. And
But we ain't building houses.
No, and we're not using 4-foot sheets of anything. We use deck boards. And the deck boards we use usually are 12, 16, and 20-foot lengths. So if you're lucky, it might be an inch extra on there, but don't ever build a deck exactly the width you need it, because you may end up biting yourself in the butt if the boards are a little short. Or if you're going to need to trim those boards a little bit to make them look nice, you can't just lay them down on the deck and screw them down and go, man, I'm an artist, because that's going to look like crap. You got to cut the lines of the boards. Right, Rylan? Yep. It's job site wide around here, man. We all know what we're talking about as far as that goes. So
if you can't build something longer than 20 foot because of the size of the deck board limitation, what are some things that you can do?
Oh, well, the first thing we do is if we're over 20 foot on a deck, let's say we're between 20 and 22 feet, we'll add surface borders so that we can decrease the center width of the deck down to 20 feet. And then we have a opposing board that goes around the deck so that we can like have an inlay of decking, of 20-foot decking. If it's like 24 feet or longer, let's say the deck's 36 feet wide, then I might do a combination of 16-footers and surface borders to get to 36, or I'll use 20-footers and cut them down.
And you said surface border. What does that mean?
Surface borders are a decking board that you install on the deck going the opposing direction of the main field.
So it's literally just like a border.
It's an accent border, yeah.
There's
Trim.
function to it too.
Yeah,
Because of the, as you were saying, the length of the deck boards.
Oh yeah, there's definitely. You can be tricky and crafty. Really getting into different patterns, and there's a lot of that going on right now. A lot of trends right now where guys are just putting all kinds of funky patterns in decks, just because like they want to be known or get known as somebody that's doing something outside the box. And I look at a lot of that stuff. I'm like, man, that's gonna rot in a few years. But hope they protect the heck out of that.
So we got ahead a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
We were on.
But I know exactly where we're at.
Okay, you go.
Yeah, so we're at Joyce. You're right.
Yeah.
Good job, son. And Studio Man's my son, by the way. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but
It's me.
Yep. I've known this guy for 30 years, a little over.
25.
Okay.
25
years I've known him. So, Joyce centers, how far along do you span them? So normally what I do is I figure out what my deck width is. I might add my borders in and border framing. That's going to change and then I'm going to take an average. I never go 16 inch, 16 inch, 16 inch, and then have a 3-inch joist at the end of the deck. I space everything out equally because I'm particular. It's got to be done a certain way. So, but most span charts are either giving you a 16-inch center layout or a 12-inch on center. Span chart will tell you, hey, if you have a 2x8 joist and it's hemlock number 2 and better, then you can span that. On 16-inch centers, you can span 9'6", and on 12-inch centers, you can span 10'4", 10'3", whatever it is. You can span further. If you bring the joists closer together, you can span further to get to that beam. Another strategy would be just to go up a size in your joist size. So instead of 2x8, if I can span a 2x8 to 10 feet, and I got to go 12 inches on center to do it, then I might be able to go 16 inches on center if I use a 2x10. And it doesn't cost that much more in your overall lumber package price to jump joist sizes, in my opinion. I mean, $200 might be a lot to some people, but when you're building a multi-$1,000 deck, a couple $100, I ain't tripping.
I mean, do it right.
It gets me where I need to be: faster, quicker, safer, and stronger. For $200, hey, here's $300.
That's another consideration. Is like, how long do you actually want this thing to last? Do you want it to be like a really solid thing, or do you want it just to get it done and then it's going to look bad in like a year?
Yeah,
or two?
like if you're a weekend warrior and you just want to drink beer on it and that's all that matters, then get some treated lumber and use an air nailer on it, and just air nail the deck boards right down to the joists.
Yeah.
But if you want to be if you want to represent, then maybe look into an alternate framing system like outdoor, and do aluminum and make it last forever.
Again, that's
like you'll be dead. Your grandchildren's grandchildren will be digging on this deck.
Yeah, that's kind of beyond. This is like end game deck building.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm at in my career.
Oh yeah. So I mean, it makes sense, but we're helping all skill levels.
We just cut in some wicked curves today on this aluminum. I've never seen it done in my life, and I'm kind of shocked that we were able to pull it off, but that's another story.
You'll see that eventually on YouTube if you subscribe.
Yep.
And hit the bell.
Please. Hit it twice.
So you'll know.
No, hit it 3 times. If you hit it twice, you'll unsubscribe.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't want that.
We don't want that. Okay, so we're getting there. So you chose what your span is from the house to the beam. You chose to go 16 inches on center with 2x8. You've installed all your joists. You have some hardware you got to add, some steel made by probably Strong Tie or one of the other companies that makes joist hangers and things like that. Joist hangers are also important. Definitely use them. I've seen decks that do not have joist hangers, and I will not repair those. They come down, I tear them down, and we start over. I've seen decks without ledgers before. I'm like, man, what were you guys thinking? They just stuck the joist hangers right on the siding of the house.
My favorite is when the bottom of the joist doesn't touch the hanger at all.
With the treated lumbers of today, that's becoming more and more. They come so wet, and then they dry out in the summer, and then sometimes they just shrink.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah, and Strong Tie's like, well, guys, you got to make sure that those are tight. But I'm like, well, what do I do after the wood shrinks? How am I supposed to fix that?
Mm-hmm.
Do I just go back with a hammer and smash them up into the bottom of the joist so they're touching again? It doesn't make sense. So sometimes you wonder, well, should we screw all of the joists in and then go back a year later and unscrew all the joist hangers and then pull them back up and then re-screw them back in?
Yeah, that's another thing is like, okay, what time of year are you building this deck?
Yeah.
Because like you said, if it's like a really wet season, the stuff's going to shrink.
Right.
And there's some stuff you got to account for that, right?
Yeah, like use aluminum and then you don't have to worry about it.
But if you don't have aluminum, you have to think a little harder.
Yeah, you do. You do have to think about how things are going to move in the next upcoming months. Same with your deck boards.
Because if it gets really hot, it expands, right?
Yep. Expansion and contraction is a real thing. So let's talk about that. So we got our.
I don't think we're done quite yet with joists.
Right.
Because speaking of weather, you do something always to the joists, right?
Yeah, all wooden joists get end grain treatment. Actually, any piece of wood on a job site, if we cut into it, we treat it with an end coat solution.
What else do you do? What do you put on top?
G-tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, G-tape is a way to protect the tops of your joists from rotting, premature rot. Even though they're pressure treated, if you get any sediment, pine needles, anything that gets stuck in between the deck boards will sit on top of the joist. That's the first place that rots. I take decks apart every week that are just rotten, and it's because that's the first place they go is in between the deck boards. So if you protect the top of your framing with some kind of a waterproof membrane tape, that's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, like I've seen decks that you are tearing up, and like on the joists where the deck boards were in between, you can see like green stuff rot.
You could pretty much walk up to any deck in the Pacific Northwest and look between the deck board cracks and find green moss.
Yeah,
and several places around the country as well. Just depends on the topography and the type of climate you have.
So again, that's back to like, how long do you want this to last? Do you want it to be like I did this, and this, if I'm living here, I want this to be, I have to do just yearly maintenance once, or am I going to have to replace this in a few years? That's the difference.
I sold this guy. I went on this bid this summer, and this guy's name was Roland. Really cool dude, but he had to be 80 years old. And he knew he wasn't going to be around for maybe another 10 years if he was lucky, right? And he's talking about all these other guys that have been in. And I turned to him and said, hey, I can do an aluminum frame for this deck if you'd like. His eyes lit up.
Really?
His eyes lit up. And I sold him right there. He wanted me to build his deck after I told him that. He wanted his deck to last so much longer than him, and that he was so happy to know that deck was going to be standing 50 years from now when he's gone and in the dirt, So for some people...
Morbid, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. But in his own I don't even know what the word is, in his own morbidity...
I don't know if that's a word at all.
In his own morbidness... he would smile because he just knew straight up that we were going to build him something that was so good that it's going to be there as long as the house. So I was all in. I was like, cool, man, let's do it. So he was a very satisfied customer, very happy.
Okay, so are we good with Joyce?
Yeah.
You think everyone has what they need to...
Yeah, I mean, if you don't, Google joist span chart and then how to install deck joists. There's probably something on our YouTube channel that you can find about that.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so once the joists are all installed, and you may or may not install your rim joist. I always wait to install my rim joist until I lay most of my deck boards down. You got to install your decking. We primarily use a product called AZEK. It's made by a company called TimberTech. It's a PVC decking. It's a premium deck board. It's probably the best money can buy, and I really like it. And I like it so much, that's all I want to use. I don't want to use anything else because I just enjoy AZEK, man. AZEK is where it's at as far as I'm concerned.
You like what you like.
Yeah, I like what I like. I don't have to explain it to you guys. I'll say one thing.
Look at it.
I'm a it's a beautiful board for one. And when it's down, it's even better. But I'm a heat manipulator of decking products, right? I torture stuff. And you, Calvin, you've been a witness to how badly I can torture boards.
I've been there. I did.
As a matter of fact, we were reminiscing the other night on some photographs in the kitchen, and we were showing Calvin's bride some cool stuff. And I go, hey, Calvin, look at this. Remember this? And I was taking boards and trying to cut them in different ways so I could get the boards to bend tighter. And I completely failed. I was throwing away just hundreds of dollars. It was like $1,000 night for me, probably.
Yeah, there was blisters on everything.
Including my hands. I was in tears, but it was just interesting to see. But when you can punish a board as hard as I punish boards, and you can see the kind of abuse that it'll take, then you realize, hey, that deck board is probably going to be just fine as a square.
Yeah.
And
again, how long do you want it to last? How good do you want it to be?
Yeah, I mean, if TimberTech is putting a 50-year warranty on AZEK, and I can only give you a frame that maybe it will last 30 years, you're basically buying a 30-year deck with a 50-year top. If I can give you a 200-year frame with a decking product that has a 50-year warranty that's probably going to last 100 years, we're both going to be dead before that deck needs to be replaced. The aliens will know that Dr. Dex built this. When they come down with their spacecraft and scan it.
Yeah, the house will be gone.
I don't really believe in that. I was just saying.
The house will be gone, but the deck won't.
Yeah, man. I mean, we might have a flood or something, or I don't know. It's just in my nature to do something excessive that is on top, over the top. It's in my DNA. I can't help it. I don't think I'll ever change, no matter how old I get or how long I do this for. I'm always going to try to do something above and beyond what I did last time.
Right. And now we're going to go below and close back to the deck boards.
Sure.
There's one thing I don't think you covered is blocking. Is blocking necessary?
Yeah. Depending on your design, it's absolute. Minimal, I do a over beam blocking. It's called roll blocking. When you put when you put blocking in between your joists over the top of your beam, where we come from, we live in earthquake country. Things move around here, okay? They shake and things go back and forth. Well, if you put blocking in between your joists over the top of your beam, that's the best way to keep those joists from ever rolling back and forth. It's going to keep things from collapsing or pancaking on you, okay? So with that being said, the other thing would be mid-span pressure blocking. Now, mid-span pressure blocking usually goes in between the run between the house and your beam, and it helps keep the joists straight. So when you're laying those deck boards down, you're not concerned about the middles of the joists swaying one way to the right or to the left, because joists don't come straight. Joists come curved and twisted and warped. So you need to bring them into precision with some mid-span pressure blocking and make them look straight. And then it also sturdies up the deck. It helps with deflection. So deflection is when you bounce up and down on something. How far do the joists deflect or move down when you're jumping up and down on it? So
and you organize your joists.
Yeah, for wood joists, guys, and I think we've done a video on this, and I know I've done it on Instagram. I grade all my framing, which means we lay all of our joists crown up on top of two spots, and I usually try to grade wherever my beam is going to be on the deck. So if my joists are 12 feet long, but my beam's at 10 feet, then I try to grade at the 10-foot mark on the joists, okay? Then I take a stabila, Stabila's a level, a straight, but use any straight edge you got, and you put it across all the joists. And across all those joists, there's going to be one joist that's the highest of all of them. Of all 25 of them, there's one that's the highest. You mark that joist. You pull that joist out of the pile. You stick it to the right or left of you. Then you do it again. And you do it again until you have graded all of your framing at the 10-foot mark. Now you know when you lay those joists out over the beam, make sure you orientate the joists the same way that you just graded them so that they're all sitting on the beam. It will minimize, I call it roller coasting, where when you lay your decking, it looks like a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's like wavy.
Yeah, you're avoiding the wave, and you can't eliminate it. You can just minimize it. Then after that, we may end up going and we might plane all the joists down the high spots of the framing. If there's any additional high spots, we may plane those down a little bit.
And plane just means make them flat.
Like a hand planer. You can use a belt sander, but a hand planer works really nice. Or any shaving tool that you may have. You don't want to overdo it. I've had a couple guys do that too, where they just took it too far. It's like, man, what are you doing? Now you're planing out everything. Like, that's not the idea of planing out joists. It's just to take the high spots out. It's less is more when you plane a deck. When you're going to plane out a deck, less is more.
Just go slow.
Yeah, just that's the best. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you about that.
Stop and think for a second.
Don't overanalyze that stuff. 1/16 of an inch aren't going to really matter this way. As a matter of fact, you're never going to notice it unless you're laying on the deck. But see, I do that because I'm on my knees all the time, and I always see that stuff. Or if you're coming up a set of stairs and you look at the plane of the deck and you're like, holy smoke, who built this? This is terrible. You know, sometimes you can't control it. When things move and warp and shrink, you know, unless you have an additional beam in the deck just to control that. Another case for aluminum, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So footings, beams,
posts.
So yeah.
Footings,
posts, beams, ledger, joists, blocking, deck boards
up to the end, and then you have your outside rim joist. I never put in see, that's another reason to have over beam blocking, because it keeps everything nice and straight and plumb until you get the deck boards out past that beam. Then you can figure out where to cut the deck off so that you have I always like to start on a full deck board and end on a full deck board whenever I can, when I'm building a square or rectangle. It's just pro. Be a professional and don't have a half board at the end of your deck. If you're going to do that, then start from the outside of your deck and work your way in. If you're going to pre-install your rim joists, start on the outside of the deck and work your way into the house. It always looks better to have a ripped board at the house than it does to have it on the outside of the deck. Pro tip. Okay, write that one down, guys.
It kind of looks like the deck flows out from the house.
It just bugs the holy living crap out of me when I see a rip board. Now, there's some circumstances when there's a 6-foot jog in the side of the house or different, jogs around the house that you cannot avoid. You just cannot avoid it, okay, to have a rip board. I just try to minimize that as much as possible as a professional. And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this podcast. If you pick something up, then you must click subscribe to our YouTube channel. Must.
Right. Please. So, what's after that?
Fascia.
What
accessories?
is fascia?
Accessories. Fascia is beautifying the outside rim of your deck. It's putting decorative pieces in that match the decking color, or it could be an alternate color. But fascia covers up all the framing, the outside framing, the side joists, and the outside rim joists of the deck. Cool.
And railing?
Railing required over 30 inches to your universal building code, or I don't know. I always get that one wrong. People always correct me. Well, doctor, it's not universal building code. It's world domination code or some crap like that. But whatever. It's a UBC, something like that, or IBC, International Building Code, maybe. Did I get it? All right. So, according to the International Building Code, if your deck's over 30 inches tall, you require some kind of a guardrail, which has to be built to a certain specification. You just can't slap up some posts and a split rail every 30 inches. That's not going to cut it. You can't have more than a 4-inch gap anywhere on the rail. Actually, I say 3 and 15/16 gap where a 4-inch sphere cannot pass through any particular part of the rail.
A 4-inch sphere, or also known as
a child's head. A child's head. Yeah. And then on a staircase, it's 6-inch sphere. The rail is still 4-inch, but then there's like this little triangular gap in between the riser and the tread. But I always put side fascia on those too, so kids cannot escape my staircase. They got to bounce all the way down from the top to the bottom. They're not getting through the sides of it. No way.
You're like building a jail for them, kind of.
Yeah. There's plenty of places to grab and stop yourself, but you ain't falling through.
Nope.
No way.
No, sir or ma'am or others.
Nope.
That about covers it.
Yeah, unless you guys get into like benches, and those are all just accessories,
Which we will get into on the bonus episode of this podcast. How about that?
Which coming right up. That's basically your basic terminology and items that you need to build a deck.
So like we've said the entire time, and we've repeated it because it's important, supplement the things that you learned from this for your area and just for your own research to know more. We spent an hour together, but it's so you can go in a direction, but it's not going to be completely enough. And of course, on-the-job experience trumps a lot of stuff. That's one of your biggest learning.
I think that even doing a storyboard for something like this, where you take these terminology, if you've never done this and you're getting ready to build a deck, I just had somebody reach out to me today and tell me that they learned how to build a deck from watching our YouTube videos. And I was like, really? That's interesting, because I don't really have a tutorial on how to do that, except for all the videos that we've shot about doing different parts of building a deck. So that means this guy went through and found about footings, and then he found another one about elevation. Mm-hmm. And when I say elevation, I'm talking about post and beam. Justifying elevation. Ledger. So if you can justify your ledger, your post height, and your beam set where they go, then everything else is a piece of cake, really. So elevation has a lot to do with setting the proper heights for your ledger. That's always like a number one thing for us, ledger on the house. And then you got to determine your post heights. We use a laser. We use a Stabila LAR 350 to get that beautiful flat top. I just got to do a little math to figure out the height of the post. Then I'll write it right on the footing. I'll write, okay, cut this post to this height right on the bracket. And then the guys know exactly where to put that post, lock it in, then we set our beam, and then we're off to the races. All right, guys, that's our podcast for today. If you learned anything, I mean anything about something, show us you did by clicking that subscribe button. hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Are you going to be bell iconing this thing too?
For YouTube, it's going to be on Spotify, but we have to cover all the socials,
Yeah.
You got to do the social media game,
Hey, I'm in. Hey, I believe I'm hardcore into social. Excuse me, I had pizza for lunch. I'm a little heartburn.
Yeah, if you want to get the prize, you got to play the game,
Yeah, so I just appreciate your support. If you like this and you want to keep seeing us do this, show us. And the way you show us is financially supporting the channel, financially supporting our podcast, and buying a T-shirt for you and all your friends and every single person in your family.
So yeah, some house cleaning stuff at the end here. If you want more stuff, more Dr. Decks, you want to learn more, you go to patreon.com/drdecks. There'll be a link in the description if you're watching on YouTube. You get bonus episodes. You can submit videos, ideas. You get your questions answered. We will answer your questions if we can legally. We had a whole section on this podcast. We want to answer your questions, and we will, but we don't want to get ourselves in trouble. So if you ask the relevant questions...
We have really good attorney, too, by the way.
We have...
Yeah.
So, there's different tiers. Head to the Patreon if you want to support the show and want more stuff.
Or if you want your personal questions answered by me, then...
Yeah, not by me, by him. By him.
Or, hey, if you want him to answer some questions too, that's cool. We just need to know what's up. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. And if you happen to be watching this podcast, thanks for watching. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and buy a shirt. Links below. Don't forget about our Patreon.
There's also squid jigs.
Squid jigs?
Yeah.
What's a squid jig? You'll find out in the next. You'll find out in the bonus episode when you sign up for it. All right, guys. Thanks for watching and listening. Have a great day. Over
Bye.
now.